Liz Truss is our international trade secretary. Maybe that's not the bit that cheers you up. I just can't believe it. I think she's winning the prize to become the next Chris Grayling. Tonight, she has tweeted very proudly that she has been speaking to people she describes as international business leaders, asking them how much better would things have been if Britain had only been running trade according to WTO rules for the past 45 years. Which is a very interesting thing to say, partly because it would have been worse than being in the biggest, most important trading bloc. More importantly, the WTO was founded on the 1st of January 1995. Is there nobody in government in charge? I mean, what is the difference between the British government, you might think, right now, and a nursery? In a nursery, there is some adult supervision. Like on science and books now. No. The truth is that we're all here for a reason, and the reason is whether you may have voted for Brexit or not, we're all fed up talking about it, and we're all worried about the state of our country. And one of the things I'm worried about, which is what I'm really going to talk about tonight, is the normalization of lying within our political system. In the past few days, the EU27, the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, the former Chancellor Philip Hammond, the Scottish Court of Session have all, in various ways, told us that the Prime Minister has been lying to us. The Supreme Court didn't quite say that, but it clearly was not very impressed with what's been going on. I fear that if the people who have lied to us about Brexit get away with this, they will lie to us about something else. Maybe the NHS, maybe the economy, I don't know what it will be, but we are being told lies. Now, the title of the book, Brexit Without the Bullshit, I discussed it with the publisher, and I thought, if you take all the bullshit, the lies out of it, is there anything left? Well, there is quite a lot, and quite a lot of it is somewhat worrying. One of my daughters, one of my young daughters said, "Daddy, I don't think there should be a swear word on the cover of a book." And I said, well, I mean, bullshit's not that bad a swear word. She said, "I don't mean that, I mean Brexit." She's 7. I blame the parents. The way in which the government has tried to avoid telling us the truth is quite extraordinary. I did the research for the book and discovered a lot of things which later became public in the Yellowhammer report, which the Sunday Times broke in September. And the government went out of its way to say this report was out of date. It was published in September, and it was based on something dated August. That's the kind of thing that they think they can get away with. The biggest sin in political life for some people now seems to be telling the unvarnished truth. And if you don't believe me about it, ask Sir Kim Darroch, a great diplomat, a man whose career was ruined when he had to resign for telling the world, when private emails were leaked, that the Trump administration is a bit dysfunctional. I mean, how very dare he? What an extraordinary thing to say. I mean, that's not the sort of thing you could read in your newspapers. And he's had to resign. So I felt, when I was considering writing a book, I just wanted to know, what are the facts about Brexit? What would it look like? What would it do to things that I care about? And at the same time, during the European election campaign, for example, I was aware that the lying was quite extraordinary, and it was filtering through, or had filtered through, to ordinary, decent people. Just to give you one example, I was canvassing in Oxford Street, and a woman said to me, "I'm not going to vote for you, I'm going to vote for Nigel Farage." And I said, "That's fine. Would you mind me asking you why you're going to vote for Mr. Farage?" And she said, "I'm going to vote for him because the European Union is totally undemocratic." So I said, "So you're voting in a European election for the European Parliament for someone who has been in that Parliament for 20 years. talk me through which are the undemocratic bits of that. And she said, I hadn't thought of it that way. But I'm sure she still voted the way she was going to do. And more recently, at Conway Hall in London, I asked a woman who said she was a Brexiter, and I said, welcome, I'm glad you're part of a dialogue. She said, yes, she voted very proudly for Brexit in 2016, June 2016. So I said, would you mind me telling us all what kind of Brexit you voted for? And she said, and I'm going to quote, I voted for a clean Brexit, leaving the EU without a deal on October the 31st, 2019. What do you say to that? I said, you couldn't have, and she got very cross. So what's going on? Well, this isn't my first book, as Ian kindly said. I've done quite a few, but this is definitely the first book I've ever done which was reviewed before anybody could have read a copy. And there's some gentleman in the audience, I don't know where you are, sir, who did. Yes, you, sir. Reminded me of this, because he got one of the earliest copies. And before he could get his copy, before bookstores got copies, there was a review on Amazon of a book that the person involved couldn't read. I'd like to read it to you, the review. The headline says, dangerous propaganda in an illiterate package. It's on sale outside, by the way, if you're in. There's every chance this assembly of extremist fantasies will prove of adequate sophistication to appeal to today's rabid left-wing extremist. That's you lot. To even the slightly educated, it will appear too crass and vulgar to bear. This book is the product of a man who projects his fantasies over reality almost to the degree of psychosis. That's me. Not fake news, but a fake review. So we've got from the Prime Minister, right down to some fake book reviewer on Amazon, to a couple of ordinary, decent people who've told me that they voted for something which isn't clearly factually correct. They may think it is, but isn't true. We're an enlightened country. I mean, literally, we're a country of the Enlightenment, of facts and of science, and I'm very proud of that. And I'll get on to a bit about how I think that is being seriously damaged. Our brainy Britain is being seriously damaged. But we're also entering a kind of unenlightenment, a kind of Trump land with all this lying going on. And it's the denigration of experts, it's people appearing on television telling you that they know a lot about climate change when they clearly do not. And it's also about the anti-vaccination movement and others. Boris Johnson has been fired twice for lying, as we know, once for making up quotes in the Times, and if you haven't read these, it's quite extraordinary what he did, actually. It is amazing that he has ever worked as a journalist again after having faked those quotes. And then he was fired by Michael Howard for his personal life. And now as Prime Minister, he's claiming that he needed to prorogue Parliament, as we know, in order to get on to his exciting crime-fighting and National Health Service health agenda. 70% of British people told the Ipsos Mori poll that they simply didn't believe him. And he's telling us that his relationship with an American woman who apparently was in receipt of public funds was a matter of receiving technical support. I used to phone BBC technical support all the time. I have to tell you, it wasn't that interesting. But it does shed new light on what may be the solution to the Irish border. If it's technical support, there may be a lot of happy lorry drivers around. So the idea of the book was simple. Strip away all the stuff where we've been lied to and see what's left. And I'm not going to go through all these things now because these are not in the book. But the things I kind of threw away were Norway plus and Canada plus, because there was always a plus. What was the plus? You get a free cappuccino every morning if you vote for Brexit. If I said to you, I'm going to sell you an Austin Allegro plus, would you think it was a Mercedes? I don't think so. It's just a sales gimmick. And throughout the Brexit process, one of the things we've got to come to terms with is those who sold it to the British people were much, much better at coming up with the right slogans, the right buttons to push, than the people who were in the Remain campaign, who were, frankly, 3 years ago, useless, and maybe are not going to be much better in the next few months. We will have to see about that. My top tip, as you already know, is that Brexit is not an event. It's a process. So that other phrase, get Brexit done, has got 2 out of the 3 words, which mean it won't work. Not get, we all understand get. Brexit, we still haven't decided what it is. And you can't do it if you don't know what it is. I deal with a lot of corporations now, talking to them about the other book, about how leaders tell stories. And I always ask the CEOs, if you were going to do the biggest thing your company has ever done, would you decide to do it in 2 years' time before you'd actually decided what it was? Or would you do it the other way around? You know, and they laugh, they know what I'm talking about. But we have decided to do it and press the button for Article 50 without deciding what it is. And then get it done. Well, it won't be done on October 31st, even if we leave on October 31st, because everybody in this room knows, in fact, everybody in the government knows, that's when Brexit begins. That's when the negotiations will begin. That's why there was a withdrawal agreement with a 1-year transition period, which we will not have if we crash out. So a quick look at the facts. Leaving the European Union is something much bolder than anything Mrs. Thatcher did. I mean, Mrs. Thatcher was an underachiever compared with Boris Johnson. I mean, all she did was she privatised industries, she privatised council houses, she stood up to the Argentine junta, she helped defeat the Soviet Union in the Cold War, she stood up to the miners, revitalised the City of London, and so on. But Boris Johnson is simultaneously trying to change our foreign, our domestic, our trade, and our economic policies. That's what he's trying to do, because that is what is necessary in order to achieve the Brexit he's talking about, with huge impact on every aspect of our lives. So just some facts that are in the book. The impact on our food supplies, we're already seeing some of this stuff. Now, I noticed today that there could be a problem with toilet rolls. You didn't see that on the Brexit bus. 95% of the vets in our slaughterhouses are EU 27 citizens. Those are the people who certify food fit to eat. They're EU 27. Only 1% of seasonal fruit pickers in this country, in England, are British. Most of the rest are EU 27 citizens. Sheep farmers I've been talking to in Devon and in Sussex are very worried they're going to have to slaughter their herds if we do crash out. Farmers in Northern Ireland, I'm going to Northern Ireland shortly, I've noticed that dairy farmers there are saying they're extremely worried they could lose their farms if this all goes badly, as they suspect. And then one other area of facts that I just wanted to talk about, which is the trade deal with the United States. Now, first of all, Boris Johnson, in one of his many misstatements, I would say, was in Aberdeenshire a couple of weeks ago, pulling a bull. Did you see that picture? Yeah. It was a photo op, classic photo op. But if you forget the photos and listen to what he said, it's very interesting. He told Aberdeenshire farmers, of course we'll be able to sell your great beef to the United States, but you can't really expect the Americans who want to sell their beef here. I mean, does anybody believe this? Yeah. I mean, Aberdeenshire farmers are very smart people, I have to say. I can't believe many of them actually swallowed that. But that does get us onto what a trade deal is. It's a treaty. In order to get a treaty, it's not something that Donald Trump can produce. He won't do the negotiating. He may not even be there. It could take 5 years, it could take longer. It will have to go through the US Senate. But it's negotiated by the US Trade Representative. And one of the great things about the United States is so much is open. So the USTR, Trade Representative, has been holding hearings. And I quote some of them in the book. And I promise you that chlorinated chicken is the good stuff. I've eaten that, and it's just not a very good way of bringing up chickens. I think it's the wrong way to bring up chickens. That's simply a way of coping with unhygienic conditions. But if you want to know what we face in a trade deal, look up ractopamine in pork. Now, you may not eat pork, which is fine, but it's not really about that. It's about how the trade representative works. And the way it works is this. During the open hearings, the US pork lobby, which is incredibly strong, they said right at the start of their presentation, we represent 60,000 producers in 42 different states, which means there's 84 members of the 100 in the US Senate who pay attention to the pork lobby, more than Liz Truss. Right? So when they say something, it's important. And what they say is we cannot get our pork into Europe because we won't buy it. The European Union will not buy it. And this is not some, bendy bananas, banning prawn cocktail flavoured crisps nonsense that Boris Johnson has dreamed up. It's done for quite good reasons. Those countries of the EU are also joined by more than 100 other countries around the world, including those bastions of great food, Russia and China, which eats a lot of pork. They ban the imports of pork from America because of ractopamine. And the US Trade Representative heard from the pork lobby, there are 84 senators who will pay attention to them, that it is absolutely vital for them to have access to our markets. Now, of course, in negotiations, that might not happen, but that's how negotiations will work. It will take a long time. And of course, we can have the easiest trade deal in history if we do that.
Yeah.
But we're not going to do that, are we?
Yes.
Yes, we are. That's right. That's
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, that's exactly what worries me. And the same things are true of healthcare. The big healthcare companies want in. You can read it. Read the transcripts if you want. Pharmaceuticals. I should say, insulin is a real problem. Gentlemen, if you require Viagra, 100% of it is produced in Ringaskiddy, County Cork. So now is a good time to stock up. So Viagra, toilet rolls, get your pork ribs, get your bacon, all that stuff. And the little things in life, the visa waiver system. The Foreign Office hasn't been talking about that, but the EU does. As Jean-Claude Juncker's spokeswoman put it, ETIAS will apply to the UK as a third country post-Brexit. So I don't know how that's going to work, but if we crash out on the 31st and I'm in Ireland, will I actually, perhaps not Ireland, but if I'm in France, will I need to get a visa waiver to come back to our country? I mean, seriously? Have we been told this? It's not a secret, but it's not something you read in the Daily Mail for some reason. And then there's the big things, will the United Kingdom continue to exist? All 32 electoral districts in Scotland voted to remain. Northern Ireland, as you may know, 51% now are contemplating a united Ireland. So these are very interesting times. The bit that really worries me is the question of soft power and how we're seen around the world. We have got, in one Cambridge college, just for example, more Nobel Prize winners associated with one college than all those Nobel Prize winners from China or Japan. We're a brainy country, we sort things out, we solve problems. It's one of the reasons why we have such a great reputation for our universities. President Rouhani of Iran went to Glasgow Caledonian University, Bill Clinton, Benazir Bhutto, stacks of people came to universities here. So as I've been traveling around, I've been collecting a few stories, anecdotes, newspaper cuttings for how we are seen around the world. And I thought you'd like to hear some. In Germany, Jacob Rees-Mogg, 6 or 7 months ago in a German news magazine, very, very sober magazine, kind of like The Economist, was described as somebody who could one day be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I thought that was quite amusing. And then they described him as das lebende Fossil, the living fossil. In Ireland, Boris Johnson's comments that the Irish border is not much different to the border between Islington and Camden is a constant source of something. I was going to say humour, but you can imagine. And then there was the previous Northern Ireland Secretary, Karen Bradley, not this one actually, who's fighting his corner in an interesting way in the cabinet. But Karen Bradley seemed to be confused that Unionists and Nationalists don't vote for the parties on the other side. Very confusing, obviously. Where's she been for 30 years? The United States, the New York Times did a page and a half on the man they called Failing Grayling and kind of asked, how do you become Chris Grayling? It's very interesting. Maybe you start as Liz Truss and you kind of work your way up. One of my favourites is about Venezuela. I bumped into on a train a British journalist whom I kind of knew, half recognised, and we had a chat. And I said, I hear you're in Latin America now. He said, yes, I've just come back from Venezuela. And I said, well, how are things there? He said, well, it was very odd. He said, you know, the Maduro regime was very repressive. About 1.5 million people had left the country, mostly into Colombia. There were riots on the streets, lots of street protests, food shortages, CS gas tanks, paramilitary snatch squads. He said, oh, it was really difficult. And he said there was one quite hairy moment where I took refuge in a cafe, and I was speaking on the telephone in English, and 2 Venezuelans came up to me and said, are you English? And I said, yes. And they said, we hear things are really bad over there. I wish I was making that up. And as you know, in France, there was the government minister who nicknamed her cat Brexit because it couldn't decide whether to go out or in. And I tried to persuade my wife that for a short time we should nickname our dog Farage on the grounds it leaves a massive pile behind it and somebody else has to pick it up, but she didn't like that idea. The serious point is this, that every year in Cumbria, in a pub in Wasdale, they hold the world's greatest liar competition, and it's a bit of a laugh. It's a very British kind of thing to do, and people tell silly stories. And I obviously think lying in a public house is absolutely fine. I suspect we all have done it sometimes in our lives. Lying in public life has become like an epidemic, like a virus, and it is very, very dangerous. If you're a doctor or an academic or a teacher or a business person, just about anything, any profession I can think of, and you told lies, and it was obvious you were telling lies, you'd be out. You wouldn't be promoted. And I spent 1 year of my life on one lie, and the lie was, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. No, I didn't. No, really, you all know the story. And of course, it was the first impeachment of a president since the 19th century. He almost lost his job. But now, the lies are coming thick and fast. Of course, sometimes telling a lie in political life is okay, I think. I mean, Bill Clinton wasn't the first to tell a lie about sex. It was a terrible thing to do, and he was humiliated by it, and he was quite shamed by it, actually. I was there for quite a lot of that time. Winston Churchill once said, in wartime, truth is so precious, she must be attended by a bodyguard of lies. And I'm fine with that. I think if we were at war, we wouldn't expect a leader to tell us the whole truth. Why would we expect that? But this is different. If you read the Washington Post or New York Times, you will see that the number of lies told by the President of the United States is calculated by the Washington Post at least once every 3 months. And on the 12th of August, which is the last time I saw it, the Post said, quoting here, President Trump has made 12,019 false or misleading claims over 928 days. That's 13 lies a day. It's such a blizzard of lies that the American media, which does a great job, as does most of our British media actually, I know some of you will disagree, but I think most journalists, most of the time, are really trying very hard under really difficult circumstances. But if you're faced with this blizzard, what do? Do you keep stopping everything that the president does to say that's a lie, that's false, that's false, that's false? It's very, very difficult. And then you're just coping with yesterday's ones when another lot arrive. It's quite extraordinary. The New York Times columnist, Charles Blow, said, Donald Trump lies all the time. We know that. Some of us are incensed and disgusted by this. Others have been worn out by it. But few even attempt to deny or excuse it anymore. It has simply become a recognized feature of the man and a predicament for the country. Nobody, in other words, expects the truth anymore. And Sir Henry Taylor, who was a British diplomat in the colonial office in the 19th century, once said that falsehood ceases to be falsehood when no one on either side expects the truth to be spoken. And now he was talking about diplomacy. I think it's got a lot wider, and I think it's really unfortunate, and we have to call out the politicians who do it. It's very difficult, but we need to do it. So what can we learn from this? Well, one thing we can learn, I mean, my book is about, these are the facts, as far as one can establish them, about what will happen to schools, what will happen to universities, what will happen to nurses, social care. Where will we get these workers from? What's already happening? What about investment? Why is unemployment very low, but actually many companies are leaving? What's going on? So that's what the book's about. But I'm kind of worried about the limitations to facts because of this. Populists communicate through feelings rather than facts. So when the bus that all of you will remember, not the buses that Boris Johnson, because it's his hobby, you see, he paints buses in his spare time. Does anybody believe that, by the way? No, I don't think so. The other bus, the £350 million claim. Now, we all focused on that, and Sir David Norgrove of the Statistics Authority said that was misleading. It was complete misuse of statistics. Now, you could say it was a lie. A lot of us would think that. It was certainly a misuse of the facts. But underneath, it said, let's fund the NHS instead. Let's fund our NHS instead. And that touches our hearts, most of us. Most of us want to do that. They're very, very good, the Leave side, at touching the way people feel. And most people, most of us, most of the time, haven't got the time to sift through the facts and try and figure out, is that bit true? Is that bit true? I mean, we're fortunate in one way with Boris Johnson that, frankly, if he told us we were in Winchester tonight, many of us would go outside to check. But it is still serious. I'm Chancellor of the University of Kent, and one of our academics has contributed to a book, or was one of the two people who wrote a book, which I notice is also for sale outside, in which he talks about this by saying that 64% of Leavers thought immigration had been bad for the UK economy, 80% saw it as a burden on welfare. That's how they feel. That's the bit below. That's let's give money to the NHS. The facts are completely different, according to Oxford Economics. The average EU migrant contributes £2,300 a year more to the economy than the average British person. And that's partly because they're young and vigorous and working very hard, and because many of them want to save money so they can go back to their country of origin. But nevertheless, facts are difficult to get through all this blizzard of lies. So I'm going to cheer you up by saying one thing, which is that populists are great at connecting. Make America great again. Who could possibly say there's something wrong with that? What a great idea, great slogan, I'd be with that. But how do you do it? They're great at telling us, Norway plus, Canada plus, all the trade deals you care to mention, cake, have your cake and eat it. They're very, very good communicators, and we've got to get better at communicating. They are terrible at delivering. If you don't believe me, come walk with me over Boris Johnson's Garden Bridge. Or the bridge that he's going to build between Northern Ireland and Scotland. I'd just come back from where that bridge would be, and when I said, how's the bridge going? The best that happened was people laughed, and some of them said rude words. Those of us from Scotland find it very difficult to take. Politics is the art of the attainable. What we've been sold, and one of the reasons we're in such difficulty, is that we're in a state where what we're being sold or told is unattainable. The perfect Brexit of the dreams of 17.4 million people is not going to happen. Donald Trump is not going to build the wall and make Mexico pay for it. What is going to happen over the next couple of weeks? I don't know. I don't know exactly. But what I do know is that Boris Johnson has failed in every job that he's done to achieve anything significant for anyone except himself. So maybe a perfect Brexit will be his entry level into super achievement. Or maybe there will be technical support that awaits us all in different ways. But I think we should still be optimistic that it's still possible, for example, to ask the British people, is this really what you want? And if we trusted the British people, and those of us on the Remain side do trust the British people, that's why I think we should have a people's vote, confirmatory referendum on whatever deal that Boris Johnson wishes to put on it, with Remain on the ballot. And I think that because I think Britain is better than Brexit. Thank you.